in this video, I want to explain why I am buying properties in the Melbourne market when most other property investors and people are running away from Melbourne. So I'm going to take you through today a couple purchases that we picked up in the Melbourne market for clients, and also compare the types of properties of what we're picking up now in Melbourne, compare them to properties that we have picked up previously in the past, and how you can see some very interesting similarities in the two of the timing of when we are actually buying these properties in the market cycle. So let's jump into it. Now, the first property I'm going to show you today is a property that we just picked up for a client in Melbourne. It's only about 20 minutes to the CBD, and we picked it up for just $395,000, which is super cheap, super affordable, and even below replacement cost. So let's check it out. I'm going to show you through a couple photos right now. So this is the front of the property right here. It's a 2-bedroom, 2-story, semi-modern, pretty modern townhouse. Now, this is a property, again, it's only about 20 minutes from Melbourne. It's in a good location. It's close to shops, schools, amenities. And when you think about it, again, I'm not going to give you the address, but obviously, because it's intellectual property, but it's only 20 minutes drive to the Melbourne CBD. We're not talking about regional. We're talking about 20 minutes drive roughly to the Melbourne CBD, which is very, very close. This property we picked up, not on Real Estate or Domain. We picked it up for just $395,000. You can see that is the living and kitchen. It's got a backyard courtyard as well. Kitchen there, entry, one of the bedrooms, bathroom, backyard. It's only got one neighbor on that side. That's what it will look like, I guess, for all the plants and everything was overgrown. But basically, we picked it up for only $395,000. It was not on Real Estate or Domain. This property will rent out for around $450 per week, which gives it a mid 6% rental return, which is pretty good for Melbourne, if you think about it. Now, in past videos, depending on how long you've been watching my videos, I was always bagging out Melbourne because I didn't like Melbourne because the rental yields were low and properties were too expensive. Now, Melbourne is one of the most affordable capital cities in all of Australia, and it's all over the news. There's land tax that has been increased in Melbourne, which I'm going to cover later in this video, and how there's a mass exodus of Melbourne and there's more stock on the market than ever. Now, I guess one thing I want to explain to you is that I have built my portfolio up to over 110 investment properties because I do things a lot differently than the average investor. Some people may call it value investing or contrarian value investing. Or that I do is buying a property that is obviously below market value with strong capital growth and a good rental return, but it's trying to buy in a market which I believe is undervalued. And I've done this time and time again. Now, what's interesting about this property, going back to it, we picked up for just $395,000 off market, is that it sold back in 2019, 4 or 5 years ago, for over $435,000. So we bought it cheaper, 10% cheaper than what it was 4 years ago. Now you might be thinking, why the hell are you buying a property that's gone down in value? Eddie, like that's crazy. You want to buy a property that always goes up in value. Now, I'm going to explain also in this video, not just things about Melbourne, but I'm going to show you 3 other examples of purchases that I bought myself and clients have bought over the years in different states, where we bought properties very similar to this, where we bought it far below what the previous owner paid for it. And that's because we were able to buy it under market value and buy it in a market that was maybe depressed at that time, and we were buying in the bottom of the cycle. So I'm going to show you an example. This is an example, 4/130 Rockfield Road in Doolandella. Here's the address. Now, you probably remember, I don't usually give addresses out. I feel comfortable enough for now to give you this property address because we were no longer buying these types of properties in Queensland anymore, for the time being at least, because these properties have already doubled, if not tripled in value within the last 4 years. And people unfortunately jump on the back end of a big growth property market cycle and buy afterwards, and then they're waiting 10, 15 years for the same type of growth which they've just seen pass them by. But that's not how I do it. I like to buy before everybody knows about it. And yes, in this video, I am giving you one of the biggest tips of all time that I am buying in Melbourne. And if you look back on all my other videos when I was talking about Queensland in 2019 or 2020, when I was talking about Perth or Adelaide, it was all right before the market started taking off, and now they've doubled in value. So I've been right on all different occasions. Now, this property again, we bought this, it was a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1-car townhouse as an example in Doolandella. It was in a complex. Yes, it has strata. I picked this up for a client for only, drum roll, $236,900 back on the 4th of June in 2020. I hope the client can see this video because this was a phenomenal buy. Like, I wish I could go back and buy 1,000 of them. We did buy hundreds of properties just like this, if not thousands for clients. And I picked up a bunch as well myself, but still look back and I'm like, they were so cheap. What's interesting is $236,900 what we negotiated down for. At the time, it was probably worth $280, $270, but we bought it below market value. It sold 10 years earlier for, what's that? $335,000. So we bought it almost over 100K less 10 years after it was originally sold for $336. And I remember speaking to the clients at the time, they're like, why are you showing me this dud property? It's a lemon. It's not gonna go anywhere. It's gone down in value the last 10 years. But what I have realized over doing this for so long and buying properties, thousands of properties, and I own over 110 properties myself, like I know what I'm doing, and that's why I'm on television all the time, is that that market was undervalued. One, the Queensland market, and especially those types of properties were undervalued. Now, it was funny at the time, I remember showing clients these properties, hundreds of clients did buy these properties, and they've absolutely killed it, right? Because these properties now, after 4 short years, are selling for almost $600,000, between $550 to $600K for a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1-car townhouse in Doolandella, like that. On Rockfield Road, you sell it for $550 today, all day, every day. High side, maybe 600. Now that's in 4 years. It's September 2024 right now, and that sold in June 2020. No massive renovations, no massive changes to the property. The property went from 236 to 550 to 600K. That's almost triple in 4 years. Now, I remember speaking to all clients, and many clients said, oh, you're a scam, you're not, you show me a property that's going down in value and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, some people had that negative, pessimistic mindset, and they're like, no, I'm only buying a house, I'm only buying in Sydney or whatever it is, because I've heard about Doolandella and there's an oversupply of units and all that other kind of stuff. And many of them talk to other buyer's agents or property investment experts out there and professionals. And those people, I remember saying, never buy one of those units or townhouses because there is an oversupply of them. And now, and instead of that, they bought in Sydney. And during that 4-year period of Sydney, the property that that person had bought in Sydney using a different buyer's agent has gone up like 20%, roughly, right? Whoop-de-doo, maybe 15, 20% in 4 years. We've gone up over 250% in 4 years. So 10 times better results than the client just bought one like this compared to them buying in Sydney. So that's one example. And there's many factors behind this, and I've explained it in other videos, and people always ask, well, why did it sell? Why did the property market go down? And there's 1,000 different factors and things to consider about this. The one thing that you have to understand is that you don't know why this property sold for that price, and you don't know why this property sold for that price. There's a reason behind it. There's always a reason behind why property sold for certain prices, but you can't just guess what they are. We obviously bought this property very, very low. There was a distress sale, we bought it off market, we negotiated it very well, and we picked it up 40, 50 grand under what it was worth. So it was worth 280. It wasn't worth 236,900 at the time of purchase, but that's what we paid for it. That's not what it was worth. Just like when the property originally sold for 335,000, that's what it sold for. That's not necessarily what it was worth at the time, all right? Have a think about that. That's what it sold for. That's not what it was necessarily worth at the time. Now, I believe at the time, back in 2010, it was probably only worth around 280. But if you have a look at this property, it was probably only worth about 280, not 335. But if you have a look at this property, what do you notice about it? It's about that age. So now it's about 14, 15 years old. And that's when you can tell when it was roughly built, which basically goes to, it was sold off the plan. It was sold at an overinflated price from a developer, went through a marketing company, and then the investors that originally bought it got sold the dream on capital growth. They overpaid, they got sold on tax deductions. They bought a property for 335 and it was probably only worth 280. And during that market, if you look back on it and ask anyone in Queensland, the market did barely move for 10 years. It barely had any growth. Sydney exploded, back then Melbourne exploded, and other markets were going through these massive growth cycles. But between 2010 to 2020, Queensland barely moved. So when they originally bought it, it was worth about 280, but they overpaid for it. So that's one of the different reasons for the big shift and swing. That's one example. I want to show you another example now, just to add more fuel to the fire and provide you more evidence of how I've done this time and time again and how it can relate back to what I'm doing right now in Melbourne. We're moving on to the other property that I've also bought before. Now, this one's in South Australia as an example. And believe it or not, this was the first property that I ever bought. The address right there is 74 Willison Road in Elizabeth South. Now, I remember people bagging the shit out of me when I bought this property. They said, never buy in Elizabeth. Elizabeth's the butthole of South Australia, and the property prices never grow in value. Many different things. I picked this up back in November 2013. Thought it was longer ago than that. Thought it was 2011. Say it was 2013. So over 11 years ago, I bought this property and we picked it up again for $130,000. Now, going back to what I was previously talking about buying properties below what they even sold for prior, look at what it sold for 6 years earlier. It sold in 2007 for $144,000. So again, here's another example where I bought myself, and I believed at the time that it was a bank repossessed property, and I don't know why the bank repossessed it, but obviously the person that owned it couldn't afford to pay the mortgage anymore. But they bought it 6 years earlier for $144,000, and then I bought it 6 years later for only $130K. So again, I bought it cheaper. Now, again, what is this property worth now? Well, I'm actually gonna pop this on the market and sell it soon, and it will likely sell for about $450,000. So in an 11-year period that I've owned it, it's gone from 130 to around 450,000. Pretty amazing. It's not just doubled. Doubled would have been 260. It's more than tripled in value. I remember people saying, never buy a semi-detached house, Eddie. Never buy one of those because you've got a common wall with the neighbor and there's only so much you can do to it. But that's a solid house. If you can look at the photos there, kitchen, big backyard, right next to the park. I remember flying there with a mate and painting the inside of it. But that's another example. Bought it below what the previous owner paid for it and bought it in a bad market. Well, people would say it was a bad market. It was a buyer's market and there was a lot of stock on the market, but that's when you want to buy. If you've heard of Warren Buffett, he does a type of investing which is called value investing, which you're buying things where you believe are undervalued. So when prices do go back to where they should be or surpass that and catch that wave of capital growth, you bought below already from the get-go, and I mixed that with actually buying it under what it's worth by negotiating it very well and buying a property that's actually off market and not on real estate or domain due to the 1,000 different reasons why you're able to pick up a property cheaper. Could be an urgent sale, a distressed sale, a bank repossessed property, a financial issue, a divorce, a death, or whatever it is. Could be a good reason, that maybe they're moving overseas and they need a quick sale. There's 1,000 different reasons, good and bad, why urgency creates a better opportunity and you're able to get a better price when you buy a property. Example number 3 I want to show you right now. And I'm going all around Australia right now. First we went to Melbourne, then Queensland, then Adelaide, now we're going into Perth. And I'm going to show you why my strategies are foolproof and why they've made investors and the clients that I've helped out millions and millions of dollars. Check out the testimonials for yourself. But here is an example, right? So I bought this property myself. It's a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, 1 car. If you look at that, realestate.com.au isn't even right. It says it's a house. It's not a house. And if you look at my other videos, it goes to show that never trust online estimates and what real estate or domain says, because the data is always wrong. And now everyone today is talking about all these buyers agents and wannabe property investors are talking about data this and data that, and you got to trust your data. Well, data can be wrong, all right? Data can be wrong, and that's wrong, incorrect data right there. It's a 2-bed, 1 bath, 1 car unit, right? The address is 6/318 Cannington Highway, Bicton. This is a 2-bed, 1 bath unit. That's the inside. Kitchen, living, kitchen's okay, it's been updated. Solid brick walls, bedroom, bathroom, updated. Unit, a unit, guys. I saw value in the Perth market around 2021, 2022, roughly. Let's have a look at what I bought it for. Right, So if you look at what I bought it for right there, $245,000 on the, December 9th, 2022. Bought it for $245,000. Interesting enough, what did it sell for back in 2013? It sold for $320,000. Again, same thing. I bought it below what someone had previously paid for it. They bought it at the top of the market when the market was really hot, and I bought it at the bottom of the market. And if anyone knows what's happened in Perth now, it's the 5th of September 2024 right now. The Perth market, if you Google it, has exploded. It's gone through the roof. It's almost doubled in value. And this property now, which I bought for $245,000, I'm about to chuck this on the market and sell it, and it will likely sell for about $430,000 to $450,000. In 18 months, this property has almost doubled in value in 18 months roughly. If I sell it for about $450,000, that'd be around 80–90%, right? So it's almost doubled in value in 18 months, which is insane. So that's another example. I've given you 3 different examples now, and you might be thinking, well, what about if it's gone up? How do you know, Eddie, if it's not gonna come back down? And that is a good question, and the answer to that question is that if you look back on history, this is how the property cycles go. This is how you can recognize these certain patterns. And you do so by looking at certain trends like this. If you look back in 1990, it probably sold off the plan for $62,500, right? Then it sold 3 years later for a 20% drop. What a surprise, because it probably sold secondhand, and when they bought it originally, it was probably overpriced because it was off the plan. People have been getting stung by off the plans for the last 40 years, right? It's just now becoming more common knowledge. So then what happened there? 17 years later, Perth did have a massive upswing during that period, obviously. The property's gone from 51K to 257,000. It's literally quadrupled 5 times in value, which is insane during that period. Amazing. Would you say that is the top of the market? No, because it sold then 2 years later for $320,000. So the difference in price between there and there, it's gone up very, very high. One could even say in 2013, back then, that this market was overheated, overinflated, and it was likely overinflated by 10%, or even as an example, you don't know why that sold for $320,000. Obviously it was a very hot market and people could have been bidding on it left, right and center in very low stock levels. So it might have only been worth $280,000, $290,000 at the time, but it did sell for $320,000. And then over the last literally, 10 years, Perth was a pretty shit market. It was literally didn't do anything. It grew like 1% for 10 years. So it was in that stagnant phase. Going back to it, I hope you can understand now, it's not about trying to buy a property in a market that's already gone up in value a significant amount. It's funny that a lot of people now, even I get emails and they say, Eddie, I've been watching your videos. I heard Queensland's a really good place to buy and it's gonna have a lot of capital growth. I say to them, well, buddy, you're watching those videos, they're like 4 years ago when they were picking up properties for 130K in Queensland, and now the same properties are 450. In terms of Queensland, like the market has already tripled in value over the last few years. Yes, you can still buy really good properties there, which are, you can still get really good yields there. You can still get properties that are under market value, which you can in any market, whether it's hot, overinflated or undervalued market. But you don't have that element of surprise where it's gonna explode and it's been dead for 10 years and no one knows about it. Many markets that I bought in, I had that element of being there first, an element of surprise, because I've heard about in the media, don't buy there as an example. When I was buying in Sydney a lot, around 2019, 2020, you might remember, it's funny, a lot of people forget about this, but they were talking about removing negative gearing. A lot of people would put off Sydney and saying that, not buying. Those changes never ended up happening. But during that time, when people were scared about buying in the Sydney market, I was buying as many properties as I could because I knew it was an opportunity to get in with less competition out there and buy properties at the bottom. And I bought properties in 2019 in Sydney for like $740, and now they're worth like $1.6 million. They're like almost doubled, tripled in value. Right, so going back to the Melbourne market, one of the few reasons why I believe the Melbourne market is an amazing opportunity and it's a sleeping giant is because of a few different reasons, such as it's now one of the most affordable property markets in Australia. need I say more? It's an affordable area, and we all know that there's a undersupply of housing in Australia, and inflation continues on no matter what. You can't stop inflation, and as inflation goes up, building materials go up, and as building materials go up with inflation, that makes the housing prices higher because they've cost more to get built, and that drags up existing properties as well. So you're gonna have inflation and growth no matter what. Number one, it's the most affordable market. Number two, I believe if you buy right now or very shortly, like I have been, behind the scenes very quietly for clients and myself, you have the element of surprise because not many other people are looking in that Melbourne market. There'll come a time when every other buyer's agent in the world, and they probably will after I put this video on YouTube, because they'll probably just copy all my shit as usual, and they'll jump in and start buying in the Melbourne market because it's cheap and it's affordable. Number three, I would say, is since the prices have subsided in many parts of Melbourne, and it hasn't grown much at all the last few years, and the changes and mass exodus of landlords, that has actually increased rental prices. The rents are starting to increase in Melbourne. This might be due to 1,000 different things, such as inflation. It could be also due to the landlord increasing their rents to cover for different things, such as land tax issues that they now have in Melbourne. In essence, when you're buying in a property market that has a lot of negative media about it, that's to me a green light to buy there. It's an amazing time. Now you have to be very careful about this, and it's not for everybody, and I'm certainly not recommending that you go off there and buy 100 properties, and I'm not giving you financial advice, of course, but I am planning to load up on buying properties in Melbourne. I want to buy blocks of units, big stuff like that, expand my portfolio into the Melbourne market even more than I've already done so far. I'm buying a couple properties there right now as we speak for myself, and dozens of properties in Melbourne for clients also. So going back to it, that's one example that we picked up for a client recently. 395,000, rent would be $450. I really believe those rents are going to go up to $500 per week. And then all it takes is a $50 per week jump going up to 500, which you look at that property, it's modern, it's 2-bedroom, 1-bath, courtyard, it's a modern townhouse, 20 minutes to the city. I expect that rent to go from $450 to $500, $550. And even in the next 6-12 months, if it goes to $500 per week, which I know it will, or if not more, buying at $395, the yields just increased to about a 7% return, which I've never seen in Melbourne. So the yields are higher than they ever have been because the prices have subsided and they haven't grown that much over the past few years, which again is usually a good sign, not a bad sign. And during that time, inflation has pushed rents up. So rents have been pushed up, but the price have stayed the same. That means the yields have started to increase very silently and quietly about this. So again, not many other people are buying in Melbourne, but just like everyone told me I was crazy buying in Queensland in 2019. If you look at my old videos and look at the comments, everyone's like, why are you buying properties in Queensland? You're stupid. You should buy in Sydney. You should buy in Melbourne. When the market was going up, I like to buy properties in markets that are undervalued and obviously below market value by getting off market. So right now we've got amazing opportunities in Melbourne. If you do want to find out more information about how we can help you get a property that's off market, pick it up with instant equity in it. Sometimes we buy a property, as an example, that's $400K and it's already valued at $480,000. So you're making $80,000 on the way in, and you're buying in a market where it's underpriced already. Like this one's $395, owner paid $435 for it. You couldn't even build it for $395 again. It's got land content. And to finish off with one of the common questions that people always ask, what about the land tax, Eddie? What about the land tax? Now I'm gonna give you my thoughts on land tax in Melbourne. But if you look back on some of my other videos when I was talking about the land tax things that were going to be brought into Queensland, and everyone was freaking out about that, which didn't happen in Queensland, it's pretty much the exact way how I feel about the land tax which has been brought in Melbourne, is that you can't avoid land tax. You can try to minimize it, yes, but I would be more focused on how do I make money and how do I get equity and how do I make $1 million, $10 million, $100 million. That's what you should be worried about. Not I've got to pay land tax and it's going to be an extra $1,000 a year for this particular property. $1,000 a year, like it's not that much money if it's $1,000 a year. But this property would probably be far less than that, right? So right here behind me, if you can see that we've got the land tax general rates from 2024 in Melbourne. So you can see the threshold, if it's under 50,000, you don't pay any land tax. So in Queensland and other states, you got thresholds of like 600K, 500K, 700K, the land tax. In Melbourne right now, the threshold's 50 grand, which is pretty stupid because you can't really get anything that cheap. You might be able to find something, but it's very unrealistic. One major thing to consider, for that property that I just showed you before, for $395,000, that would not be in this zone, right? So you've got the different land tax payable. The first mistake that people make, and again, I'm giving you all this information for free, guys. Like, click the subscribe button and comment thumbs up or something, because I'm giving you, this is information, and just like your time's valuable, my time's valuable as well, and I'm making these videos for you, so hit the subscribe button, please. That 395K property that I just showed you that we bought in Melbourne for an amazing client, they bought like 7 properties with us. Yes, it was $395,000, but you wouldn't pay land tax on $395,000. You will not pay land tax on the price of the property. Let me say that again. You won't pay land tax on the price of the property. You will pay land tax on the taxable land value of the land that it sits on, not the property, right? So that property was $395. Is the land worth $395? No, it's not. It was a townhouse, so it had, you know, a courtyard, backyard, and the property sat on land. It obviously wasn't an apartment like, you know, 1,000 stories up. It was a townhouse. And I've shown you townhouses that have doubled and tripled in value and everything. Units are double, and we buy houses too, and I can show you other houses if you like want very similar examples of that. And also, if you're wondering a question out there, I have bought houses below what they're worth. Actually, I did show you one already, the one in Adelaide. That was a house, so don't always think it's units and villas and townhouses that go up and have these price discrepancies. It happens with all types of properties. I've done it with commercial property as well. As for that property as an example, I can't tell you the exact amount of land tax you pay, but my rule of thumb, which is probably different to everyone else, the property was $395. Let's say half of the property is actually the land content, and half of the value of the $395 is land content, and half of it is the build price, which you couldn't build that for half that price anyway nowadays because building's so expensive. But let's say the land content's 50% of the property value. If it's $395 rounded up to $400K, then the land content you'd be taxed on would hypothetically only be $200K. So that would put you in this bracket right here. The land taxable holding value, $100,000 to $300,000. So if you're in that bracket, and you would be likely for that property per year, $975. And that's what everyone is complaining about, $975. Now, let me tell you that that's a very small thing to pay. And again, the rent's probably gonna pay for that anyway, so it's not gonna be you paying for it. But point 2 is properties like this as an example. If you look in parts of Melbourne, they've actually got relatively cheap council rates. And if you look at, as an example, the other properties that we picked up in Queensland, when we were buying 1,000 properties for clients in Logan, in Ipswich, in Brisbane City Council, different councils have different council rates portions, right? The ones we bought in Logan, which have done phenomenally, they've all doubled and tripled in value, which is great. People have made a killing. I bought half of Logan myself. Those council rates in Logan were a lot higher, as an example. They were like probably 40–50% higher than other states. So if you're comparing, as an example, you know, Melbourne property to a property in Queensland as an example, you'd find the council rates are likely 20 to 30% cheaper than actual ones in Queensland councils. And that amount would likely be very close to that $975 you're gonna pay. So yes, you pay $975 for land tax, but in council rates, you're probably better off by about $600–700 a week if you're comparing it to the states such as Queensland and council regions like Logan and stuff that have a higher council rate fee, or even Ipswich or whatever it may be. Is it really $975? The difference, if you're comparing that to another state, might only be $300 for that particular property. And again, land tax is tax deductible, so you'll be able to get some of that money back anyway. Again, go off the thresholds. If you bought a house and let's say it was $500,000 as an example, and the land content was $400K, then you'd be in this one. You'd be in that threshold right there, which would be $1,300 plus 0.3 of the actual land amount. So when you get over that threshold, then it's a plus a percentage. To summarize in land tax, essentially, you know, I've given you one example there. For that one example is $975. Obviously it does change with the amount of properties, and the percentages go up on top of that the more properties you own. I guess the most important thing is that if you are trying to build a portfolio and create wealth and build as much, you know, wealth as possible for whatever reason you have, whether it's taking care of your family or retirement or whatever, you have to invest. And to me, like even paying land tax, like I pay a shitload of land tax with having my 110 plus properties worth like 90 million bucks. But paying that land tax to me is an investment on being able to hold that property. It's a cost of doing business. It's a cost of holding the property. But thankfully over time, things that are inflationary and go up, such as rents, they go up so much that usually the rents cover the land tax for you. If not immediately, maybe in 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. So the question that I asked you, and what makes sense to me, is that can you sacrifice 1 or 2 or 3 years as that rent continues to go up, and it will go up no matter what, because eventually that rent will continue to go up and the cash flow will get better and better and better on that same property. So you might start off at a property being negative in cash flow, $1,000 a year, but it's obviously ridiculous not to buy a property because you're scared about losing $1,000 a year. That $1,000 is basically like putting it into savings. You're putting it into owning that property, and that property is growing in capital growth and creating the wealth that is you've got to build for your future. That's one way of looking at it, and I hope this simplifies it. We've covered a lot in this video. If you have any questions or things that I may have missed, hopefully I didn't miss too much, please comment below, hit subscribe, and give it a thumbs up. Appreciate you watching, and check out all my other videos about the different property markets and different properties that we've bought for clients over the years. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next video. Bye for now.